a lot of folks out there, the word discipline is a word that is met with a bit of resistance. Can you tell us about the importance of discipline and what is discipline in your world?
I think discipline to me is just being consistent, and it's kind of what's required to make your dream and your vision a reality. Because without discipline, we become very reactive and just subjective to our environment. When we feel good, maybe we go to the gym, maybe we read, maybe we develop. When everyone else is doing something, we do it. That doesn't require discipline when things are going smooth and easy. But discipline to me is when you can kind of assert that higher level control over yourself and be like, no, I'm not going to have that third glass of wine. I'm not going to have that second piece of cake. I am going to get up early and get outside and move my body. I am going to study. I am going to, control my emotions in this engagement. I'm going to be the person I want to be, not the person I feel like. To me, so I think discipline is really that difference between who I want to be and who I am. And with discipline, we can close that gap.
Today's guest on the Charlene Giselle Show is Phil Kornachuk, a highly trained military expert with 22 years of service in the U.S. Army Special Operations Command. Phil served with both the 2nd Battalion Rangers and the Green Beret, being deployed 12 times and receiving a Silver Star, the third highest award for valor in combat. After his distinguished military career, Phil transitioned to a new mission, helping people and businesses forge high-performance leadership skills. Phil's unique approach focuses on self-mastery, mindset training, and resilience. Through his company, StoneWater Training, he offers executive coaching, hands-on workshop, and really exciting but tough backcountry expeditions. On a more personal note, Phil's journey really reminded me of the stories that my grandfathers used to tell me about the military, as he also served in the French military. His stories of courage and resilience have always been a source of true inspiration for me, much like Phil's dedication to mental toughness and leadership. I hope that you will enjoy this episode as much as I've enjoyed recording it. Phil, welcome to the Charlene Giselle Show. I am so excited to have you here today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here myself.
I want to start off by asking you a question that might seem a bit random, but what's the picture behind you?
This one right here?
Yes.
So that top one that was one of the first programs I ran post-military when I started a company. It's now called StoneWater. And essentially it is leadership development, but also peak performance. So that is a group of executives, athletic coaches, like college coaches in the US. And just a real mix and some leadership professionals. And we were in Yellowstone, Montana. We went off the road, off the trail, in the middle of nowhere, totally disconnected, to really kind of reconnect to purpose, values, and just dig deep and focus on relationships and purpose and things that really matter and sustain performance. And what's neat is that picture is from, I think, 2020, and I still work with about half, if not more, of those people now. So it's been amazing to watch their trajectory and their growth. But that was one of the first programs we ran.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad that you've mentioned leadership straight away, because that was really one of the first questions on my mind. Having had the extraordinary career that you've had in the military, how would you define leadership?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to look at it. So the military would tell you it's providing purpose, direction, and motivation to a group to accomplish a common goal. That's a very dry definition, in my opinion. But actually, it's one of the people in the picture behind me, and he's someone I still work with. His name is Jeff Choate. He's a U.S. football coach. He goes to me, leadership is leveraging influence to achieve an impact. And I really like that because it's independent of your position, independent of your environment. You can do it at home. You can do it at work. You can do it with yourself. It's basically moving an individual or an organization, in a direction that you're wanting them to go, for ideally for the right reasons.
And there is always a lot of debate as to whether or not some of us are born leaders or whether or not it is a learned skill. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things. It's a both and, meaning I think for someone who is naturally extroverted and was maybe raised in an environment where they grew up with a lot of self confidence and maybe did team or based on their education, they may have a higher natural inclination to lead, meaning they might have confidence, they might have communication skills versus someone who maybe didn't get dealt the same deck of cards at the start of life. However, just like many things, I think what really makes a difference is it's 100% a skill, meaning you can learn, how to craft a vision. You can learn how to communicate and connect with people. You can learn how to, execute and hold others accountable and then adapt when things aren't working. I mean, to me, these are all concrete skills. And, it's really the business model I framed, my company StoneWater around is, hey, how do we identify and sharpen those skills? Most people have them to some degree, but how do we intentionally move them forward? And again, for some, it's very natural. They just show up and they're outgoing, they're charismatic, and people gravitate towards them. And then for others, getting in front of people and asking them to buy into a common vision is the most difficult thing possible. But, even with them, I'm like, hey, it's your style of leadership. If you're leading authentically, does not necessarily look the same as mine or the same as Charlene's. It's, begin with self-awareness, identify the leader, you're meant to be, and then live that person authentically. But the core skills, I think, largely stay the same. So to me, it is absolutely something that can be trained. Again, some people are maybe a little more naturally inclined to it, but I think anyone can learn it and learn to do it well.
Do you think sometimes there is a bit of a gap with leaders that are leaders on paper, but they don't necessarily embody self-leaderships in their own lives?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think we see it all the time, where someone's in a leadership position for whatever reason. Maybe they were particularly skilled at their job, or they went to the right schools or have the right degrees, and they fall into that leadership position. But maybe they're not, they've never mastered that purpose-driven, value-based self-leadership, which I think is at the core for sustained high performance. It starts with you, but it's not about you. To me, when it comes to leadership, meaning I'm aware of who I am, my strengths, my opportunities to grow. I know who I want to be and I feel called to be. And I'm working on that. And from that foundation, I can lead others authentically, meaning it's not an act. That can be real. And, you don't have to be perfect. But if you're consistent, if you're selfless, if you're open, I think you can go a long way.
I would love for you perhaps to pick a moment in time in your extraordinary career where you realized you became the leader you aspired to become. Was there a moment in time when you thought, I am that leader?
I wish I could say yes, but to me, it's something where that target keeps moving. So to me, it's much more a journey than a destination. So there's been times in my leadership career where I'm like, yeah, I did that really well. And, I should probably remind myself when I think that, like, be careful, because just because you performed well yesterday doesn't mean today is guaranteed. So no, I think for me, there definitely are some standout moments in my leadership career, and they're probably the exact inverse of what you'd expect. I think probably one of the most defining moments of my leadership career was when I had someone who was very close to me. He was another senior leader, but reported to me. He had made some pretty large ethical mistakes overseas, just unethical decisions on his part. I found out about them. This is literally someone who had saved my life, about 2 weeks before. And, I found out about these ethical lapses, and I called him in, and, at first I made sure, is this really what's happening? It was, called him in, had a hard discussion, like, hey, this is straight up wrong. And he was like, come on, really? Here we are in Afghanistan in combat, and you're talking to me about this? Like, who cares? And I'm like, well, I care. This is an ethical breach. It's a big deal. We're leaders. We've got to be better than this. And it was pretty contentious. And then I remember telling this small team, and we'd been in combat at this point for 7 months, telling them, like, hey, this is the issue. Here's how I addressed it. And part of me was like, are they going to turn against me? Because it could be something, when every day you're putting your life on the line, it could be an issue that people would be like, you're making something out of nothing. Like, who cares? But actually what surprised me is out of the 10 people who were there, 9 were like, thank you so much for stepping in and addressing this. We saw it. It bothered us. We appreciate it. And then one person was like, I don't know why you're making a big deal about this. Like, whatever, you guys figure it out. But that was a very defining moment because that was leading kind of against the current and doing something that I wasn't comfortable with. I wasn't excited about, but that defined me. It's easy to lead when things are good. And another time was when I made a huge mistake and dealt with it terribly. And when I realized, another leader checked me on it and was like, you're all messed up. When I turned around, I talked to my team and I owned it in front of them. That was one of those times where, again, I'm literally owning a mistake. I'm explaining how I could have handled it better, what the consequences were. And ironically, the team, I think, appreciated that level of ownership more than if we just pretended nothing was wrong. So I know that may sound counterintuitive, like, talking about one very stressful time of, challenging a team about something that may seem trivial while we're in combat, and the other was owning a mistake. But I think those were, when I walked away from that, I'm like, I might get fired tomorrow, but I feel like I did the right thing. And I think when you can take that mindset of like, hey, I'm following a higher level of values that transcends my position, that transcends my quote unquote job. I think that's when you can really be a free and impactful leader. And
have you seen those values evolve across your career? So would you say you have some fundamental core values that have remained the same?
I think they've probably been largely similar. I may define them, and they certainly translate differently now in 2024 than when they did in 2005. But I think just that integrity, the discipline, love's a core value of mine. They've largely stayed the same. And, I compare values to kind of a compass, right? It tells you the right direction to go, but it's not going to make your feet walk that direction. So I know integrity, discipline, love, evolution and constant growth. These are things that are near and dear to my heart. And when I'm consistent in those values, I'm the person I feel called to be. That being said, situations will come up where I'm like, I'll deviate, I'll be selfish, or I'll kind of not say something when I should, and I'll compromise integrity in a situation. And that's when you just feel like, well, I'm really missing something here. I'm not who I'm called to be. So I think the values are very different. They look different in practice today than they did, again, 15 years ago in combat. But the values are probably fairly consistent. And I do a lot of work kind of going back and reviewing and asking myself, is this how I want to be defined? And so far, I typically come back to, largely this is who I want to be. Maybe I'm not that creative. Maybe I just found something that works for me. But
well, you've mentioned discipline there, and I love that you mentioned that. I come from a military family as well. My grandfather was in the French military, and he served for 2 decades, and I grew up with him mentioning discipline a lot to me as a little girl. I have vivid memories of that. And I've learned to somehow love that word because I cherish that memory of my grandfather. But for a lot of folks out there, the word discipline is a word that is met with a bit of resistance. Can you tell us about the importance of discipline and what is discipline in your world?
Yeah, I think discipline to me is just being consistent, and it's kind of what's required to make your dream and your vision a reality. Because without discipline, we become very reactive and just subjective to our environment. When we feel good, maybe we go to the gym, maybe we read, maybe we develop. When everyone else is doing something, we do it. That doesn't require discipline when things are going smooth and easy. But discipline to me is when you're, when you can kind of assert that higher level control over yourself and be like, no, I'm not going to have that third glass of wine. I'm not going to have that second piece of cake. I am going to get up early and get outside and move my body. I am going to study. I am going to, control my emotions in this engagement. I'm going to be the person I want to be, not the person I feel like, to me. So I think discipline is really that difference between, who I want to be and who I am. And with discipline, we can close that gap. because what's natural and what's easy a lot of times, takes us down a path that at the end of the day, we look at it and we're like, this isn't the life I wanted. Something I've noticed with myself is generally, not always, but generally, if it feels good in the moment, it's probably going to hurt me over the long term. If it's challenging in the moment, a lot of times it helps me in the long term. It's the getting up early, it's the going to the gym, it's going out for a run, it's reading something that triggers some deeper thought. Even in conflict with others, when you have an authentic disagreement and you can, instead of just responding emotionally and impulsively to it, but listen and, stand your ground, but also be open and listen. Like, those are the things that make you stronger, not blowing up or caving in. So that's kind of my thoughts on, the impact of discipline and to your point, why it is such a positive thing.
Has there been a time where discipline has been tested to the max in your life?
Yeah, it's funny. The military makes discipline very easy because they have a structure that, initially they kind of force you to do everything. So you build these habits, whether you want to or not. And then later, I served in special operations and in some fairly elite organizations. Later down the road, just peer pressure forces that discipline. Like, you have to be fit, you have to be fast, you have to be studying, learning, practicing different languages, getting out there. And so the military discipline was relatively easy to maintain. When I transitioned in 2019 to being a civilian, all of a sudden there is no defined structure. So now it's on me to define, hey, who do you want to be? How do you want your next however many years you get blessed with? How do you want to live that? And then, are you going to get up, at 5:30 in the morning? Are you going to, go to the gym? Are you going to read? Are you going to study? Are you going to build your business, or just settle, for something that's easy, but maybe not that fulfilling? So I think I could say probably, discipline as a civilian now is, especially the first 2 or 3 years, was one of the more challenging times, because it's being tested. Now it literally is self-discipline.
And how much of that transition was challenging? The reason I ask is I see in the corporate arena, a lot of folks that I work with have a bit of a identity crisis at one point in their career, right? When they've reached that point, they're very seasoned, they're perhaps about to exit the working world, or they're in this retirement point, which is the equivalent of becoming a civilian in a way, because there is a shift of identity. How do you maintain that strong sense of self?
Yeah, to echo your point, it's something I consistently see, whether it's with professional athletes or accomplished folks who are in a certain position. The military is notorious for it, because you do something for 20 plus years, especially at a very high level, and you've lost friends and you've been in intense situations. It's very easy to attach your identity to that position. I'm a commando, I'm a soldier, I'm a soccer player, I'm whatever it is you've done and done well. And to me, I think what really helps is recognizing the fact that, hey, we are more than what we do, meaning you're not any given title. I'm not just a father. I'm not just a husband. I'm not just a leadership coach or a former soldier. At my core, there's a purpose and their values, and they define me, and how I live them defines me, and they can operate in any environment. Whether that's, hey, I'm a school teacher, or I'm homeless, or I'm the president, or, pick a role, you can still execute your purpose in it. And that's when I work with folks, when we're trying to define our purpose and really do that hard work, which I think is kind of like catching smoke. It's incredibly difficult, but it's also like, why are you here? Right. It's one of the most existential questions we'll ever ask. And it's something where I'll tell people, your purpose, when you nail it down, it can't be taken from you. You can lose your health. You can, God forbid, lose your family, lose your job, get shipped to Antarctica. It does not matter where you are and what's around you. You can live your purpose. And I draw a lot of that from, when you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, he really highlights how people who are truly purpose driven, don't just survive the death camps, but actually come out stronger and with relationships intact and with things they can carry on and give to the world. Even as evidenced by that book, he wrote it in 9 days. Would not have happened if he had not had those horrific experiences. Yet it's changed probably tens of millions of lives now. So I think going back to the original question, I apologize. I know I went all over on you there, Charlene.
Love it.
But I think when you navigate that transition is if you can identify your purpose and go, this is bigger than my role as an attorney or, the lead partner at this firm or a position. What am I about? I'm about helping others. I'm about, improving the community. I'm about, when you can tack into that, then it's okay. How do I do this in my new role, in my new position? I'm retired now. I'm, taking a sabbatical. How do I still continue to grow and serve or, whatever that purpose is?
Mm. And have you perhaps seen colleagues or friends or peers really struggle with that transition?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say probably more struggle than don't in my old field. Again, because people have invested so much sweat and blood and energy into, the job they've had and the professional role they filled, that when they retire, whether it's because of injury or they just, have done 20, 30 years, they have a really hard time pulling themselves from that identity. Mm-hmm. And you'll see some of them basically retire and then go into a role that's very similar, just because I think a lot of them enjoy it and they love what they do. And I think that's totally valid. But then I know there's others that go, what else could I do? I don't know this is who I am. And so it's definitely some work and unpacking and rewriting those scripts and those narratives we tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And how much do you think that boils down to the mental training, that sort of mental toughness that you've developed?
I think it's a lot of it, and that true mental toughness, which is again, founded on that. Hey, what's the core purpose? What are the defining values you want to govern your thoughts, your words, your actions? Which is a level of mental toughness I think a lot of us don't get to. We think mental toughness, we really focus on the discipline and do hard things. And I set a goal and I'll do whatever it takes to get it. I think when you go a few levels deeper to purpose and values, you go, hey, am I setting the right goal? Like, yes, this is hard. Yes, this will require focus. Is this the right thing? Is going to medical school at this time, is that truly fulfilling your purpose? For some, it's going to be yes. For some, it's going to be no. They're chasing a position or they're chasing the prestige that comes with it. But I think if you can peel back the layers and go, hey, at my core, what gives me true mental toughness is, that defining purpose, those values that govern, again, thoughts, words, and actions, that will help navigate some of those bigger transitions, I believe.
Phil, I was wondering if you could perhaps give us a little bit of a tour of your extraordinary mind and walk us through how did you navigate such extraordinary moment and combat anxiety, combat fear, combat all those very intense human emotions in the way that you have.
So what's interesting is, when I was younger and in a lot of the more chaotic situations, I don't know if I could have answered that. Like I would have just been like, I don't know. It just works. And I just bounce back and it does. But then as I've gotten older, and I think a lot of us do this, you look back and you go, why did this work? Why didn't this work? And we kind of sort of look at things objectively and ask ourselves like, man, that worked really well. Why? And so when I look back at it now, I go, hey, what were the three major things that helped me navigate stress, pressure, and extremely challenging situations, whether they were mental, psychological, or physical. And there's three pieces. I think number one was having a foundation. So being able to fall back on, a defined purpose and values and go, this is why I do what I do. On my worst day, my biggest failure, can acknowledge the failure, but then go, here's why I did it. And here's the values I chose to govern my decisions. And, or sometimes I go, it was a failure because I ignored that. So having that foundation, that purpose, and that values defined to yourself. And I encourage people like, no, actually write something down and don't worry about if it sounds perfect or if this is going to last forever. Like, start the journey now. Take a step, put something down and remind yourself and build that muscle. So number one, having your foundation. Number two, I think, and this ties into the discipline comment, is having a routine. Meaning I have something that every day, if I do it, I show up and I'm ready for chaos. Whether it's a great day or whether it's a terrible day, I start the day off, my mind, my heart, my body are right. For me, that involves, there's usually some movement. There's some breath work. There's some, I review my purpose. I review my values. I ask myself what it looks like today. I visualize what I want the day to look like. I'm putting the right things in my body. I'm avoiding things that kind of drag me down and increase kind of those physical stresses. And that routine to start the day. And then I have another one I do at the end of the day to kind of, hey, download the successes, download the failures, take the lessons learned, and then just leave them. Again, you take, it's one of those things where as you were coaching someone yesterday and they're very fixated on past failures. They looked at something and they were letting the failure define them as a failure. And I go, why are you letting that define you as a failure? To me, I see someone who's overcome extreme adversity. Like, we're looking at the same tragedy. You're saying this means I'm a failure. I'm saying, look at how far you've come since then. It's a success. So at the end of the day, having a way to unpack, if things went well, great. Why did they go well? How do I carry that forward? If things went terrible, okay, what's this teaching me? Where's my lesson? And then, again, a little bit of movement, a little bit of breath work. But that routine, I think, gives you structure and resilience. And then the last thing, I encourage people to do when they want to build that mental toughness, and the military was really good at this, especially, again, in the special operations realm, is that concept of stress inoculation. Meaning, if things are going wonderful for you and work's great, family's great, that's good. I'm so happy for you. Look for opportunities to push and challenge yourself. Again, you asked about the picture behind me. That's one of the concepts I do with StoneWater, is engineered adversity, meaning people will deliberately subject themselves to things that are ambiguous and challenging and uncomfortable with the intent of building that muscle so that when life throws adversity your way, you're like, okay, I've handled hard things before. I can get through this. So the three foundations for me with respect to mental toughness are, number one, having your foundation, knowing why you do what you do and who you want to be and how you want your thoughts, words, and actions governed. Number two is having a routine that works for you. There's so much good work out there, but finding what works in your life and starting small, but being consistent and disciplined. And then lastly, looking for opportunities to inoculate yourself to stress, to build those muscles that can handle adversity. Don't seek to avoid challenge, look for it. And so that when it does come for you, you're ready. That's my opinion.
And in the heat of the moment, when you were under huge pressure in this life or death moment, how do you handle your mind then, in that moment?
Yeah, so that's really hard. And I'm even thinking of, one night, and this was in April 2010, where I was in a small group and about half our team was injured, one was dead, we were surrounded, and things were really bad. There was no help coming. Matter of fact, the help who came to help us themselves were attacked and unable to get to where we were at. And it was real easy to quickly fixate on how bad things were and how, what could happen, right? Our mind goes negative. And had I stayed that way and just kept doing unfocused actions, probably wouldn't be here today. None of that team would have survived that night. I mean, it was a really bad situation. And I remember specifically on that night, it was about 2 a.m. I had about 5 injured people in front of me. There's explosions around, a building's on fire, we're being shot at. And I remember telling myself, like, hey, I need to clear my head and make good decisions if any of us get out of this alive. And I took a knee and I just, instead of firing and running around and yelling orders, I just took a knee and I began breathing slow and just sort of focusing, okay, what do I need to do? What's the next little thing I can do? So instead of shifting on how bad it was, go, okay, what's one small thing I can do to make this better? And I actually had a little book of laminated paper in my pocket where I'd written, hey, in this type of situation, do A, B, and C. And in that type of situation, so I had basically a playbook or instructions to myself so that when you get so stressed and your mental bandwidth is compressed, it kind of gave me a framework to start working in. Now, none of those little instructions to myself ever thought that I'd be in a night like this where half your team's injured and there's no air support and you're fighting inside a building that's filled with enemy and all their friends are outside and your reinforcements aren't coming and your medevac's not coming. That's literally where we were that night. Very difficult situation to imagine beforehand. But I remember just going, okay, what's one little thing I can do to get things better? Okay, we can do this. We can bring the team together. Okay, now we can move out of this area and try to find the people who came to rescue us. And it was just one step at a time. And what ended up being a really horrible situation ended up being a really pivotal battle in that area for years to come. Totally changed the dynamic. It was far worse for the enemy than it was for us. And it was in that worst time that my team was having, ended up probably being our most impactful mission. And it all started with just taking deep, slow breaths and then focusing on what's the next small thing I can do to make this better. Like, yes, it's acknowledging the harsh reality of the situation, but maintaining hope and action towards better things, but focused action.
Mm-hmm. So in that moment, you feel the anxiety rise, you feel the fear rise, but you're aware of it. And so you use your framework and your little guidebook to follow the steps to keep composed.
Exactly. And, now being older and doing some more research and work with other, people in this arena, I recognize, hey, doing that deep, breathing through your nose, triggering your parasympathetic system, tapping into that calmer, more focused self is that first step. So, when your heart rate's rising, when you feel your face getting hot, flushed with blood, going, okay, I'm having a stress response. Just remember to breathe deep and slow through my nose. Okay. I'm stressed, but that's okay. What do I need to do? Who do I need to be in this situation? And then working through it in that order.
Mm. And that can be translated so powerfully in the offices, right? Because I see a lot of leaders lose their tempers, get angry, and actually not display the greatest leadership attributes. I've seen that in action. What do you think about those traits when leaders start to lose their cool and be unable to stay composed?
Yeah, I think, and I've been there before. I've been that leader. Yeah, I think we're all human, and emotions are extremely powerful. I think when we do it, there is a loss of credibility, and the emotional brain is not the best decision making brain. The logical analysis, that frontal cortex part of our brain, when the emotional brain, the limbic system's taking charge and it's in fight or flight mode. I mean, we're yelling, we're impulsive, we're reactive. That usually isn't terribly helpful in the moment, especially not in a modern day office situation, versus doing that deep, slow breathing, tapping into that frontal cortex, that higher level brain. Just, I think that lets us kind of lead in a much better place. And it's easy to talk about here because neither of us are triggered, obviously in the moment. For leaders to remember that is the challenge. And that's where I try to communicate with folks. I'm like, don't wait until you're in that emotional situation to try to remember all this. I'm like, make it a habit. Practice the breath work in the morning. Remind yourself who you want to be. Remind yourself what's important to you and why you do the things. Practice that every day so that when you get in those stressful situations, you're not trying to remember it. It's like, okay, this is what I'm about, connect and inspire, do good, push my limits, let myself be governed by integrity, discipline, love, excellence in this situation. And even telling ourselves that, and our emotions are being like, no, I just want to yell and tell this person what I really think. And you go, okay, I acknowledge it, but you're not in charge. So take a back seat. Let's handle this intelligently. And my kids, my kids will be like, yeah, Dad, you say that. Let's see you do it. I've got a large family, but yeah, that's the toughest place to practice is at home.
Of course. Do you practice breath work with your children?
I've talked to them about it. They, because I'm dad, it's funny. if I'm briefing, like if I'm working with a client or a sports team, and several of my children are athletes. I mean, they're teenagers and in their early 20s now. So if they're ever with the team, or sometimes they'll come help me with some training, they'll listen to me when I'm talking to like a college football team. But if I tell them at home or encourage them to do breath work, they'll just eye roll and, Dad, not one of your clients. So, yeah. They see me do it. They know it matters to me. I think one of them, she does it on her own. I don't know if I was the influence for that or not. And then a few of them definitely should, but we'll give them time. They'll get to it like I did. If anyone's got ideas on how to communicate that to them, I'm all ears.
I was curious, Phil, what is your go-to breathwork training?
So I like to use Jason Selk's model. He does relentless solution focus, 10-minute toughness. And, I've been privileged to co-present with him a few times. So he'll do, inhaling through the nose, deep and slow, into the diaphragm, or, deep down into the navel, kind of belly breathing. Inhale for 6, hold for 2, exhale for 7. Mm-hmm. But I know myself, I get excited, Charlene, and I count real fast. So I inhale for 7, hold for 3, exhale for 8. And I'll typically do 3 cycles of that before I go into my morning routine, when I remind myself purpose, values, I play out the key tasks of the day, go over my identity statement. And then I'll close out with another cycle of breath work for, especially if I'm working with folks who are kind of newer to breath work. I'll encourage them to try box breathing, because it's so simple. Just, again, through the nose, deep and slow into the diaphragm, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, and cycle that, 4 or 5 times. And then to people who still like, I don't remember the numbers. I'm like, I just remember to breathe, deep, slow, and quiet through your nose. Just do that. Close your eyes, just relax and feel the breath coming in and out. And it's breathing. We all can do it, or we wouldn't be alive. So it's just being intentional and focused and realizing we have control. So those are 3 ways, but I typically do the Selk method, the 6-2-7.
Great. And other than breath work, did you use any other tool, either to tap into your rest and digest nervous system, or to control your mind in those heightened moments of pressures and when you had to really stay composed?
For me, it's physiological hacks, not intentionally. Normally, I might try to catch myself. Hey, what am I doing with my body? Am I hunched forward and kind of in a defensive, compressed position where it's hard to breathe? And try to just straighten up and, have my body at least portray who I want to be. And, then the emotions kind of follow for a lot of us. But for me, it was normally the breath work, and then really going back and reminding myself, hey, here's my purpose. And I still do this today. I probably do it more today and more intentionally today than I did, when I was leading soldiers in combat. Even though I did a version of it then, like I said earlier, I don't know if I could have told you then what I'm telling you now. It was almost more instinctive or kind of background learning. But today, definitely, it's normally the breath work, the reminding of the purpose, reminding of the values, and then just trying to go, what does that look like in this situation? Okay, what's discipline look like now? Okay, it means calming my emotions down. It means thinking before I speak. It means putting my ego on the shelf, because discipline doesn't care about ego. And then I'll deliberately go, okay, so what is the next action? Which usually in those situations is listen or assess versus respond quickly and forcefully, which is my default setting, which is usually unhelpful in crisis. It's ironic when things are moving faster around you. I think one of the best things we can do is slow down. Just take a breath, slow down, build awareness, and think before you act.
That seems so counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And how do you continue this slowing down journey in terms of recharging and recovering? How do you charge up your battery?
For me, outdoors is a lot of it. Just getting fresh air, sunshine, I live in the Pacific Northwest in the U.S., so it's not so much sunshine all the time. Sometimes it's rain shine. But really, for me, it's trying to do that morning and evening routine outside goes a long way. I'll try to process lessons learned. I'll journal, and then I'll be very intentional about it. I make a point of in the morning, hey, what am I grateful for? And it's ironic because some mornings we get up and I'm like, I'm not grateful for anything. You're just in a sour mood for whatever reason. Didn't sleep well, had a bad day yesterday, but I'll force myself, like, think of at least 3 things. And sometimes that list starts pretty basic, like I'm alive. But very quickly, when doing that gratitude drill, you realize you have so much to be thankful for and blessed with. So I'll do that. That normally shifts my mind into a good spot, charges my batteries up a bit, especially when coupled with the breath work, the purpose work, and being outside. And then in the evening, and I'm way less disciplined on my evening routine. It's an area I have to improve. It's great because one of my coaching clients is working on his as well. So working with him is making me better because I'm like, I can't tell you this and not do it. But in the evening, I'll try to make it deliberate, another little journal entry, and I'll reflect on, hey, what did I do well today? This isn't what am I grateful for, but what did I actually do well? Even if it was, again, it seems like a train wreck of a day. Hey, there's something I did well. Sometimes it's just survived. But, starting with, hey, reflect on what you did well. How do you carry that forward? And then also reflecting on, okay, even if it was a great day, what could I improve tomorrow? How can I get better? And it's just that cycle of, hey, unpack the day, but also draw value of it. Whether it's a great day, a lousy day, like carry something forward and try to get a little sharper, a little better tomorrow in a positive sense, not in a self-critical sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you look back now at your past career in the military, what are the biggest lessons that you take with you and that you carry with you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think one of the biggest things to me is first off, every day is a gift, right? We all make this assumption that we're entitled to 75, 80 years. And the reality is the present is a gift. Us having this conversation is a gift. And everything up to this point has been a wonderful lesson, but the present is all we really have. We can learn from the past, but we can't go back and repeat it. At least not yet. Maybe there's a time machine out there. I haven't seen it. And, when it comes to the future, we can plan for it. And I encourage people to, right? Like have goals, have dreams, but you can't predict it. Like that's just a plan. It's life gets a vote. And just being able to recognize and appreciate that. And also understanding, your accomplishments, your validation for success, was it a good life ? Is completely independent of what title you had, whether I was a colonel or a private, what job you had, these things, these are social constructs. What's far more important is how did I treat others? Was I consistent with who I chose to be? Was I the person I wanted to be, or was I reactive and went with the flow? And, what did I give back to others? How did I impact their lives for the positive? To me, those are the things that really matter. When I look back at the military, that just resonates because there were, friends that were here one day and not the next. And you look back and you go, that could have been, or maybe should have been me. And then you recognize, okay, so today's a gift. And what's ironic is, in the military, it was very vivid to you because of the environments you were in. But it's no different than any of us really going through life. Like we're here now, make the most of it. Hopefully tomorrow comes, but if it doesn't, own today and know that when your time comes, be able to walk away and say that was a life well lived. And I think that is a powerful gift.
Mm. And Phil, I was curious. I know that you were awarded a Silver Star, which is an extraordinary accomplishment. What does it mean to you?
To me, that award it's really more reflective of the team's effort that evening. And that actually was when you asked about a situation where I was under stress. That was April 6, 2010 in northwestern Afghanistan. that's when I was awarded that. And several other people on the team were awarded similar or the same levels of recognition. So to me, I was the ground force commander. I was in charge of that particular mission. But the reality was, I was one of many. And a matter of fact, there's people doing a lot more than I was on the ground. And so to me, that award is just reflective of a team effort in a really extreme situation. And, honored by it, but, realize there was a lot more than just what I did going on that night.
And is there a specific memory that really stands out for you when you reflect on everything that you've done and all the places you've been and all those moments?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I think that evening's probably one of the more defining ones, just because the level of intensity that came with it, and again, it just was that reminder of, hey, in the most extreme circumstances, like, take a breath, slow down, focus on that next positive action, because that night up until I took that breath, like, everything that could go wrong had gone wrong, and all of it was out of our control. And it was one of those things of, I don't control the weather. I don't control the enemy. I don't control the terrain I'm on right now. I really don't even control other people. I can influence them, but I can't control them. And it was just that, okay, what do I control? Okay, I control my thoughts. I control my words, my actions. I have agency over those, and start from there and move forward, rather than focusing all these things that, I couldn't control the fact that our reinforcements got blown up and were under attack. I couldn't control the fact the aircraft couldn't see the ground. I couldn't control the fact that the enemy kept coming and really didn't like us. Those were all outside of my control. But I control, hey, am I calm? Am I clear? Am I communicating a vision of, like, we'll get through this? Like, it's not going to be easy, but we'll get through it. And that was a big takeaway.
Do you think that perhaps if we compare this to the corporate arena, there is a bit of a comfort crisis whereby a lot of great leaders are actually working in environments where, yes, they're working very long hours and it's extraordinarily difficult from an intellectual standpoint and the pressure are immense, but there is still a comfort crisis that actually means that they become over time less and less resilient? Do you see that a little bit, and could you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think Michael Easter does such a great job with his book titled "Comfort Crisis." I had the privilege of meeting him last summer. 100%. I think modern society, it is a society where we're blessed with a lot of good things, right? But I think when you become overly comfortable, you do lose that resiliency. You do lose that toughness and that edge. And it's something where, it's the ironic thing is I think if you pursue ease, you pursue a life of ease, comfort, wealth, it actually ends up being a pretty stressful, challenging life that you're never fully satisfied. You can always have more. You can always be more comfortable. You can always get a bigger boat, a bigger house, whatever. And so I think a lot of us spend time chasing the wrong things, chasing comfort, chasing ease, and then wondering why our stress goes up, why our anxiety goes up, why we're depressed, why we're sleeping poorly. Versus if you flip it and you go, you know what? Like, I'm not going to chase comfort. I'm not going to chase easy. I'm going to chase meaning. I'm going to chase purpose. Like, I want to have a life of value and impact, of an authenticity. And I accept the fact that it's going to be extremely challenging. When I started my business, I remember I left a somewhat comfortable corporate job. And I was in a totally new area. I have no connections to where I live now. I mean, this was, 3 years ago about. And my wife was in medical school, just starting medical school. So that was a huge expense. And she was no longer bringing in any income. And then I had eight children. And I went from having a job to starting my own company with no business contacts, no anything. Extremely, extremely uncomfortable. But it definitely was, that's what motivated me. I drew a lot of purpose out of it. I knew why I was doing it. I knew why I was taking the risk. My family was supportive. And even though it was really hard, it was wildly rewarding. And, I reflect back on that versus, and several of the clients I work with are in situations like this where they have comfortable jobs, they have well-paying jobs, they have position, and they feel restless or empty, or, they're looking for the next challenge. And again, there's nothing wrong with comfort. There's nothing wrong with having good income. There's nothing wrong with having a great position. But I think when that is the end state, 100%, that's where we start getting that comfort crisis and that challenge. Like that, life isn't about easy. Life is about meaning, at least in my opinion.
What are some key practical tools you could give folks listening that are in leadership position and perhaps identify a little bit with this comfort? And what would you give them by way of game plan, action plan to up their mental game and their resilience level?
Yeah, I think first it starts with self-awareness, just really pausing and just reflecting on, hey, where are my feet right now? Where am I right now? And why am I here? I'm lead partner at this firm. Okay, that's good. Or maybe it's not good. I don't know. But why am I here? Why does this matter to me? And what should I be doing? What would most, tie into what I feel called to? I would say it probably should reflect on what's their why, what's their purpose. If they find themselves where things are going well and they're like, no, I'm in the right position. I like what I do. I like who I do it with. I draw meaning from this. Things are just going well. I'm like, that's great. I'm happy for you. Ask yourself though, where can I challenge things a bit more? Where can I push the limits a bit? What can I do? And it's funny because sometimes for an executive who's working 80 hours a week, the most uncomfortable thing for them to do is to work 40 hours a week, take a vacation with their family, and delegate to someone to be like, okay, Charlene, I'm going to the Canary Islands for a week. I'm not going to have my phone. Like, you have it. I trust you. And man, that executive's going to be sitting there at the airport. Like, maybe I should bring my, so I think that what's uncomfortable looks different for other people. I work with a lot of athletes and they go, yeah, uncomfortable. Like I'm going to work out harder. And I'm like, well, that's what you do. That's your thing. Like, that's actually your comfort zone. And that's great. I'm like, but for you, uncomfortable is like, hey, let's go talk to a few of these homeless people. Let's get their story. Let's do something that is very out of who we are, but for an intentional purpose. I mean, I think that's the other important part is I'll see people do things that are really hard sometimes, but for no reason. I'm like, wow, what's the thought process behind this really difficult thing? And they're like, well, I want to build mental toughness. I'm like, that's great. I mean, but ideally you want it, like, it should be something that's advancing you, helping you grow. Yes, it should be challenging, but there should be a purpose behind it. Just, banging your head against a wall hurts and will maybe make you more pain resistant, but it's stupid. Like, do something that challenges you for a purpose, makes you better, helps you grow into the person that you're, seeking to be. So, I guess going back to your initial question to that executive who's finding themselves, maybe in that comfortable position, it's just pause and reflect on, where am I now? What's right for me? And where can I push myself a little bit? How can I get uncomfortable? And accepting the fact that more is not always uncomfortable. Going from 80 hours a week to 100 hours a week is probably not what's necessary. It's probably the other way, and we'll feel twice as uncomfortable.
I'm so glad that you shared that story because I've recently been working with executives that found it more anxiety triggering to not have their phones than to have their phones. So not being on emails was too anxiety provoking for them. And it was actually somehow relaxing to be on emails. So when you've gotten to that point, there is perhaps an intervention needed.
Time to push the other way. I think I'm like everyone else, I'm a social media, my phone, my emails, it all draws me in. And it's funny how that is kind of comfortable to just sit there and respond and scroll, that's easy. It's comfort in a way, but I've got this great it's a box that locks my phone up now. So I will literally put my phone in this lockbox. You set a timer, 30 minutes, whatever I want for my focused work. or my reading or mindfulness, whatever I'm doing. And you can't open it. Like if it rings, you can talk to someone. So you can use your phone as a phone, but literally nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing I am probably more uncomfortable when that is locked up than, going out for a 12-mile run with my dog or something. It's pretty funny.
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned that as well about nature and the run, because I think that for a lot of corporate folks out there listening to us, sometimes it's that disconnect between the time spent in their heads and the time spent on their feet. People are just
Yeah.
in their heads so much that they don't actually spend time in their body, and that creates so much anxiety. Do you see that as well with your clients?
Yeah, 100%. I think we lose perspective. I mean, as a human species, we've probably only had these kind of sedentary jobs, at least in the numbers we've had them, the last 200 years, maybe? I mean, before that, office work was, reserved to very few people. And so I think we evolved as organisms designed to move, designed to be outside, designed to be solving problems, thinking, adjusting, adapting. And so, I think yet our modern society rewards time in front of the computer, time sitting in conference rooms, time on Zoom. So for people to realize, no, take those deliberate, intentional breaks. Go park a few streets away, walk into work. It's all about the little things. I think one of I've been coaching for several years now, and I think probably one of the most consistent things executives will take from my coaching, it's not a strategic roadmap for their company. It's not communication strategies. It's not problem solving on business side. Probably the most common thing people walk away is they get up 30 minutes earlier, they step outside, and they do this. It's literally a 3-minute movement and very light calisthenic routine that can be adjusted for any fitness level. And I'm like, just do this and then just breathe and just reflect on, I give them 3 questions. And I have people who've reached back years later and are like, I still do that. I love it. That was a total game changer. And it's literally, they go outside. It's 3 minutes of movement. It's about maybe 5 or 10 minutes of thought. And then usually they finish it off with a cup of coffee and, they start their day. But it's that little piece right there, that getting out, moving, and then doing that, at regular intervals and tying it in with existing habits. You're probably going to go eat lunch. Hey, before lunch, walk for 5 minutes. After lunch, walk for 5 minutes. You don't need a gym membership and, an hour with a trainer every day to meet this need. It's little things.
Mm. And then they can join you on your next leadership retreat and climb a mountain with you.
There we go. Yeah, we just wrapped one up that was all themed on adaptable leadership, and it was, they spent a day going through the city, doing all kinds of, navigating some challenges, and then and of course we have academic pieces woven, but it was a day in the city, a day on the side of a mountain at Mount Hood in the snow. It was amazing, and then they had a day on whitewater rafting and leading themselves, in a scenario that demanded they adapted. And they lead, when people come out to our expeditions, I'm not leading anyone. I set the conditions and they lead themselves and facilitate debriefs and learnings. But it's a lot of fun. So yes, there's lots of movement. Matter of fact, I give people a 6-week train up before they come out. So they show up and I tell them they've done the hard work. I go, if you've done the mental and the physical preparation to come out here, then this is the reward.
Thanks, Phil. I was wondering if we could go full circle with one last question. I know you have a big family, and I know that fatherhood is a big part of your role and your identities. I was wondering if you could perhaps indulge us in one of the key legacy pieces that you want to leave your children with.
Yeah, I think for me, a key legacy, if there's anything I could leave with my children as they go forward, and it's been amazing to watch some of this as they've gotten older embrace this, it's don't pursue a degree because everyone tells you need that degree. Don't pursue a job because the world tells you that's the job. It's look deep within yourself. What do you love? Why do you love that? What do you feel called to do? And pursue that. Don't let anything move you off that track, not for selfish reasons, but for that's your gift to the world. Mm-hmm. And when people go, you'll never make a living, you'll never survive doing that, thank them for their opinion and do it anyways. And, I've got one son who he's in Toronto, Canada, and he's studying like underwater, literally is studying underwater archaeology. And it's been really funny because people think I make that up. And I'm like, no, that's what his major is. He's doing it. He dives and he looks at shipwrecks. And one of the favorite things I've ever heard him say back to me, he goes, I might have to live in my car, but he's like, I'm just excited about the life I have in front of me. And like, I love what I do and I love what I'm learning. And I think he's planning to pursue, teaching down the road and his PhD, but, I just love that he's accepted the fact that it's not about how much he makes. It's about how much he gives and how fulfilled he is. So if I can leave that as a legacy to them, that, the scoreboard of life isn't your bank account. It isn't your title or letters after your name. It's about, did you live your story to the fullest? And for each of us, that's a different story. And if they walk away with that, then, I've lived a good life.
Phil, thank you. Well, you just enriched mine today and the lives of everyone listening, I'm sure. So I'm deeply grateful for everything that you shared with us today.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much. It truly was an honor to just talk and share my story with you and hear your insights as well, Charlotte.
Thank you for spending your time with me today and listening to this episode. Remember to subscribe so that you can receive weekly updates. And if today's message resonated with you, please remember to share it with a friend, a colleague, or a loved one who could really benefit from this episode.